Disclaimer: this is audio horror fiction. If darkness or the creatures it holds scares you, leave now. Still listening? Good. Then let's begin. Calling my family dysfunctional would be an understatement. In the last 10 years, we have seen 2 suicides and 2 murders. It sounds absurd, I know, but the reason might be something other than our genetic predisposition for bipolar disorder. My grandfather was a well-known explorer and anthropologist. Richard O'Sullivan, it says on the cover of the books he authored, but to me and my brother, he was known as Old Dick. Yes, that's what he wanted us to call him. He had been friends with Ernest Hemingway and received several awards for fieldwork on the subject of Mesoamerica's indigenous people. He was also an angry drunk. To be honest, I only saw it once, and that was when he threw a glass at my mom, but I always figured she kinda had it coming. To say it in short, my mom was a passive-aggressive bitch. Our father had left her and she was bitter about that, a bitterness that she took out on us. Well, mostly me, because there was no doubt that she loved my big brother more than me. Maybe it was because he reminded her of her drunk father. My brother Kurt was also a drunk, and I was the only one of Old Dick's grandchildren that wasn't a complete screw-up. Even for us, the latest events seemed crazy. I can't really describe my current state of mind as anything other than disbelief. This piece of writing is my way of trying to gather myself. Well, my grandfather killed his much younger girlfriend. This doesn't shock me much anymore. It was more than 10 years ago, and understanding that he suffered from bipolar disorder, the fact that his drinking had led him to become somewhat delirious and dementia kicked in, helped me. I wasn't trying to apologize for his actions, but more in order for me to understand how it could have happened. I had been through years of therapy, but what just recently happened has shattered any sense of comfort in the world that the therapy had helped me build up. It does sound strange to say that I've come to accept the fact that my grandfather slit his 40-year younger wife's throat and wore one of the ritual masks while hanging himself. Despite the gravity of the things that went down, it didn't make much of an impact on my brother. While I was in shock, Kurt started talking about the inheritance right away. Kurt had one thing in mind: Old Dick's Stabe mask. Yes, my brother went crazy about getting his hands on the mask my grandfather had worn while killing himself and his girlfriend for one reason. It was worth a lot of money. Not only was it rare, but the fact that it had been part of a famed murder made it worth even more. Legal representatives from several South Mexican cartels had made formal offers to us, and there was just an aura of pure craziness around that object. I was scared that the cartels would simply steal it, but one of my grandfather's former colleagues told me that nobody from that area would do something so rash. It was simply sacrilegious, and stealing such an object could mean demons and demigods would seek revenge in the South Mexican mythology. My brother wanted to sell it right away, but several of my grandfather's colleagues wanted to study it, and I insisted on having them spend as much time on their studies as they needed, because that's what Old Dick would have wanted. Another issue was that the cops, in general, didn't like murder paraphernalia, and it would seem very disrespectful to my grandfather's girlfriend's family to sell it right away. It was a struggle between me and my brother. He was desperate to sell everything he could get a hold of, and I wanted to preserve Old Dick's research. My mother was just so out of bounds that she wanted us to take care of everything and couldn't be bothered unless we had cool cash for her. My brother and me settled on a solution. He promised not to sell the mask until we both agreed to do so, and I would get the rest of my grandfather's stuff. My mom, her brother, and his children got a lot of other valuable antiquities that were sold right away. None of those held any sentimental value to anybody. Life went on. I finished my degree in biochemistry, got a job, started dating a colleague, and moved in with her. My brother slowly declined further into substance abuse. He would have to work for around half a year at the time and then go on benders, but he always seemed to bounce back. That all got worse when he met Juliet. She was a bona fide junkie. It was 8 years since old Dick had passed, and Kurt went from a mix of weed, prescription painkillers, and Valium to straight up shooting heroin. Having something valuable and being a junkie should result in one thing: the valuables being pawned. I therefore asked Kurt if he wanted to store the mask at my place, but he refused. I figured I would find it in a pawn shop someday, but it never happened. It seemed that Kurt had grown fond of the mask. It hung in the living room of his apartment, and he had found furniture that made it seem like a natural part of the room. There was some sort of strange traction. The mask looked like a real, but obscure face with a few jaguar and baboon-like features, the tongue sticking out in the eyes seeming at once crazy, yet calm and detached. I started digging up the story about the mask in my grandfather's journal. He had met an extremely secluded tribe in the south of Mexico, a tribe that, according to my grandfather, had kept its connection to the Mayan culture. It sends chills down my spine when I read that Stabe was the Mayan word for demon. The more details a mask had, the more intricate its pattern was, the more power a mask held. This must have been as powerful as it got, because no matter where you looked, Mayan scripture, carved-in details, and small animals were spread all over the mask. The further I got into my grandfather's journals, the stranger it got. His writing became harder to decipher. The pivotal moments was around May of 1952. My grandfather had found a village that, in their view, was plagued by a demon. In order to understand the situation, he had daily talks with the shaman of the village. The villagers called this demon the bringer of Stababa. It had resulted in most of the villagers having recurring nightmares of pure terror, of being in the hands of demons and being torn apart and put into molten metal. Stilbaba was a term loosely translating to hell, but directly translated meaning place of fear. Here is where it got really strange. I'd always thought the mask was a gift from my grandfather, but his writing suggested something else. May 12th. The ritual will take place tomorrow. The shaman has been chanting for 12 hours by now. He is wearing the Stabe mask in a smoke-filled tent. The sun is, and this part can't be deciphered. The villagers seem fearful, and the atmosphere is tense. The farmers are going about their business, and many of the men are drinking banana-based wine from big drums. May 13th. The chanting has continued all night. Absolute fear has arrived with dawn. The shaman is now in some sort of state of constant seizure. Many of the villagers are attending to him. A long paragraph that can't be deciphered. I'm not allowed anywhere near the shaman's tent. First part of the sentence unclear. So I truly fear what will unfold. Through the chants, the term Tsuksimi is heard several times. May 13th. Tsuksimi means white death. The demon is already here and demands blood. May 27th. I have arrived safely in Guatemala City. The shaman is dead. So many villagers are dead. I have become Tsuksimi. The Stabe mask belongs with me. I had no idea how to react to the words I had just read. My grandfather was a madman, and he could have spent days conjuring up events that had nothing to do with reality, but something still seemed off. After having read my grandfather's journals, I stayed busy trying to forget the horrific pictures it imprinted in my mind's eye. I was working at a pharmacy and worked quite a lot of overtime. My girlfriend, Cecil, and I were preparing to have our first child. I actually hadn't heard from Kurt for about a month until my mother called one day. She told me she was worried. They usually talked once a week, but there had been no word from him in a few weeks. I therefore swung by his apartment and talked to him through the apartment's intercom. "Hey Kurt, are you alright?" "Oh yes, sorry bro, I don't have time right now. Talk to you later," he said. I would later learn that this would be the last time I talked to him. I'd also later learn that Juliet was dead while this conversation had taken place. Kurt had slit her throat with a kitchen knife and sat for 2 days naked in the apartment before he had slit both wrists and later tried to puncture his main artery. He died shortly after from the bleeding. It was all so surreal, and I couldn't believe that it had come so far. I figured he, just like my grandfather, had been crazy, had, in a drug-fueled fit of rage, killed his girlfriend. This narrative seemed to explain everything until the police came knocking on my door. 2 officers told me that on the wall of the apartment, Kurt had painted with blood, "I am Suksimi, the White Death," right where the mask used to hang. To my knowledge, he had never read Old Dick's journals. There is no way to describe the horrific thoughts that went through my mind. This document is a desperate memento. As engulfed in fear as I am now, I need to act. Something needs to be done. I wish that I had a better idea of how to deal with my next problem. What the hell am I going to do with that mask? I'm worried. Currently, I live in a small apartment with my pregnant girlfriend. I am, however, convinced that the mask is somehow safer with me than anyone else. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, leave a like and subscribe and share to help feed the dark machine.